And a very special good morning, everybody, or whatever time you happen to be viewing and listening to the program. I'm Jeff DeForest, along with Mike Lubie Lubitz, and thrilled to be here on NoFilter.net for another edition of the morning briefing. And there's a lot to do, and we're going to be brief, as well as we're going to cover the Saturday games in the wild card round, the second wild card round. I guess it's not the wild card round. This is divisional playoffs.
The divisional round of the playoffs.
Whatever they call it. 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on tap on Sunday. We buried you last week on the NFC games, at least I did, losing with the Eagles, who got shellacked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in sort of a surprise. I didn't respect the Buccaneers at all going into that game after their thriller in Manila 9-0 victory over the 2-win Carolina Panthers in a game that they desperately needed. And then, of course, we were right about the smelts. I don't know what kind of, well, we were talking about this yesterday on another program, Lubie. What is the most disgusting fish that you've ever been offered up to eat? You're going all the way, pinpointing the Midwest and saying that when you were in Minnesota and they offered you some walleye ice cream.
Yeah, it was
not exactly, you're thinking sea bass, coming straight out of the waters of Chile. A most disgusting fish for me, either smells. My mother was from Germany, and she used to like pickled herring, schmaltz herring, and herring and cream sauce, and it alienated me. If I see anything that looks like a herring, I'm smashing it against a wall. I mean, just going to throw that out. But the fish, the Dolphins stunk out the joint. We anticipated that. The cold weather, not particularly favorable for Miami Dolphin teams as a franchise over the years. And once again, they made it to 0-11 in games that were played in temperatures under 40 degrees in their last 11 outings. Tua Tagovailoa yet to win a game in a temperature of 45 degrees or less. And the Kansas City Chiefs looked okay in this ball game. Had to settle for 4 chip shot field goals and ended up winning the ball game handily 26-7. So we were right about that, laying the 4 in a hook. I had to lay 5 in the guy's enterprise that I have going, a personal bookmaking venture that I have with a friend of mine named Francesco. He gets his lines out of the Jewish Journal, I think. So, some bi-weekly newspaper that it's kind of like reading the headlines in the Racing Forum, where I think they do call that column the morning briefing. Might have been the derivative and the source of where we got the title for this show. And it would be something along the lines, you would have today's edition of the Racing Forum, and it would say German surrender to end World War II. Hey, they're on top of it. They're right on top of their game here. But we want to get into the 2 games on Saturday for you here today as a betting enterprise. And there's no more embarrassing thing than to be considered Mr. Chalk. Somebody calls you, if you're a degenerate gambler, and somebody looks at you at the racetrack, this is especially insulting when somebody says, "Oh, yeah, all you do is bet chalk." And you start to have a moment of self-examination, and you're thinking, first you fire back, "Oh, yeah, go fuck yourself. You know what? What are you, some kind of genius here? Who are you, Andy Beyer?" But, once you get over the idea that this was insulting, you start to have that period of self-examination when you say, "You know what? All I do is bet chalk." And you realize that you have to reassess your entire life. But in these 2 ball games that are taking place on Saturday, the line is similar. It's actually the same in both, at least the one I have. I'm not getting this out of the Jewish Journal, but I am going with yesterday's news tomorrow, as I have 9 and a hook in both games. So it will be 9 and a hook. Ravens and the Texans. Ravens laying 9.5. Many people feel, and I would be inclined to be among them, Mr. Chalk, that the Ravens will probably win the Super Bowl this year. They appear to be far and away superior to the other teams. You had to look at their games down the stretch. Lamar Jackson going to be the cinch MVP. If you have money on that, you don't need to hedge because it's going to happen. Lamar Jackson will be the MVP of the National Football League this year. He is playing in MVP-type fashion also, and was particularly strong down the stretch when the Ravens had a couple of challenging games. Annihilated the Dallas Cowboys, who subsequently suffered their traditional first-round playoff exit. And the word is that Mike McCarthy is coming back. It's Dave Campo syndrome with Jerry Jones, isn't it? He doesn't want to let go of a guy. I mean, when you see the shot from the box, now with high definition, you can actually see the strings as if his head coach was some kind of marionette. That was true with Dave Campo, several of the others. I mean, he kept Jason Garrett around for years and years, which, by the way, I kind of like Jason Garrett as a commentator. A lot of people think he's not so great, but that's because we're so used to being assaulted by the screaming maniacs who never shut up. They just keep slobbering and slobbering. Greg Olson being the greatest example of that. I don't even care if Tom Brady's no good. And I like Greg Olson. He was a former Miami Hurricane. Very nice guy. One of those guys that immerses himself in the community, Lubie, and does a lot of wonderful things. But the motor mouth that he exhibits and this whole new vernacular that everybody's trying to apply to analyzing football, a guy throws a pass right over the head of a potential receiver. And Olsen will come back and say, well, he elevated the football. What are we watching? Some magic act? I mean, we're in Las Vegas at the Monte Carlo. We're watching Lance Burton try to levitate some person. I mean, he threw the pass fucking high. That's okay. I know you can't curse on network TV, but elevated the football? The hell out of here. What does it have? Helium in it? Give me a break. That being said, as you look at the Ravens and Texans game, you are not a believer in the Cinderella story that the Houston Texans have become with C.J. Stroud.
Nah, look, I think he's a nice quarterback. I think what makes him look better is the fact that he is a rookie. They had the number 2 pick, and Bryce Young, who was drafted ahead of him, has been put in a really tough situation for a franchise that has no idea what they're doing. So it makes him look even better. But this stuff, he's the greatest rookie quarterback ever. Maybe because great quarterbacks didn't play as rookies. And when they did, they were on horrendous franchises. But again, this idea that he played at home in a goddamn dome his first game against the Browns team quarterback by Joe Flacco in his 60s. Like, that has to matter. And people throw that stuff out. Like, they just forget all the nuance. The Ravens are steamrolling teams right now. There's the only team in the NFL to me, I think, that can hold up against the Ravens is not in the AFC. And the Ravens already dismantled them. But again, I'm taking that with a grain of salt. I think the Niners, if they play again, will play them very different the next time around. It isn't the Houston Texans. Like, I think D'Amico Ryans has done a great job. I think their defense got after it versus a guy that has been playing football since the 1970s, like in Joe Flacco. So I'm not trying to be mean. I think they are an up-and-coming team. I think it's a fun story.
Yes, but this is where it ends.
Die somewhere. They just do. And I think this is where theirs dies.
This is that brick wall. There used to be a guy many years ago that was involved in a series of television commercials called Joey Chitwood. He was known as a thrill driver. And what a job this guy had. His wife would give him a brown bag with a bologna sandwich in it and say, have a nice day at work, Joey. And his job was, I don't know if you remember these commercials a long time ago, where he would drive a car into a brick wall. It's like the fat guy in a circus that stands against the wall and they shoot a cannonball at his big belly and it just bounces off and he goes, yeah, what's the big deal? Is that all you got? So, I'm with you. I think this is the brick wall. The Ravens have been overwhelmingly impressive down the stretch. They dismantled the San Francisco 49ers on the road, tore apart your Miami Dolphins, and that may have been no great accomplishment the way the Dolphins performed in the last few games of the regular season. Certainly, it was an eye-opener alluding to the idea that the Ravens were a vastly superior team, as you mentioned, Libby, to anybody that happened to be playing in the AFC. The 9.5 is always the problem.
Sucks, yeah.
Now, if it got to 10, I mean, do you see 31-21 possibly in this game? Maybe so, but you're thinking that the Ravens defense will do enough, maybe Ray Lewis is coming back, to stifle the Houston Texans, who had that win over the Cleveland Browns. And the Flacco story is very similar in some ways to the Tommy DeVito story, although on a different platform and a different level, because Flacco at least was taking a team into the postseason. Tommy DeVito took over a team that was decrepit and lying face down in the gutter in the New York Giants, had a couple of favorable results, and then, as we were saying, he went from Rayo's to Ragu, which literally happened. I mean, we were being facetious about that, but Rayo's dropped him as a potential endorser and, disassociated themselves from Tommy DeVito because they didn't want some guy that was going to be buried on the bench for the rest of his career.
That's the thing is he's not only not going to start, I don't think he's going to play it anymore.
Representing the finest jarred spaghetti sauce with apologies to Paul Newman that you could possibly buy anywhere. So, that story blew up. So did the Flacco story. He threw his traditional 2 pick sixes in that ball game and iced it for the Houston Texans, who have been a great story. But nonetheless, I don't know that the Texans can be within 9.5. And there is nothing more insulting in all of degenerate gambling circles than to be known as Mr. Chalk.
But look,
Oh my God! Right? People get furious if you imply that they're chalk eating dogs.
you said years past, it sucks to take the chalk, but if the chalk wins, there can only be one winner.
That's
And
exactly
I really
right.
feel like the chalk's going to win in that game. So
Defies many gambling credos, which is never lay points. If you took the Ravens on the money line, you're not getting much of a price. 10 points or thereabouts, 9.5 would diminish the money line probability to about 1 to 2. So you're betting on a 1 to 2 shot, but only one team can win. There are only two teams in the game. I think you're right. Go ahead and lay the 9.5 with the Ravens. 49ers and the Packers, a whole different animal there. Packers are really inspiring a lot of people with their play. That was a shocker when they went up 20-0 on the Dallas Cowboys on the road, where the Cowboys at home were close to invincible all year long. They were a Jekyll and Hyde team. Averaged about 10 more points a game offensively, gave up about 10 less points a game defensively, seemed to be primed and ready to go and make a run, maybe even threaten the 49ers for the NFC Championship and a spot in the Super Bowl. And instead, Jerry Jones, once again, Flowers were in the punch up there in the owner's box. He turned his back on the field, did not turn his back on Mike McCarthy, which came as a surprise to some people. But as we like to say, you can still see the marionette strings going down from the owner's box. Now that you have a high-resolution, high-definition TV, you can actually see the strings attached to the coach's shoulders. And Jerry says something, and the guy says, okay, yeah, we're going to run the ball. So Jerry's calling the plays there, and he's calling the shots. So he decides to bring back McCarthy. Very impressive, the Packers in that ball game. And towards the end of the season, Jordan Love came out of nowhere. He wasn't playing any better than Courtney Love at one point in time. But the Packers under Matt LaFleur, and many people doubted after that bozoic move where he had Aaron Rodgers and he decided to go ahead and kick a field goal, a meaningless field goal, and a chance to go to the Super Bowl went up in smoke as they wouldn't allow Aaron Rodgers to throw a fourth down pass. Rodgers got even more sour than he already was. Although, does it matter if Aaron Rodgers is sour about a situation? Not really, because he's sour about everything. Aaron Rodgers spent too much time in the dark, Lubie, and all of a sudden your mind can warp out to the point where you're talking nonsense, spewing nonsense every time you open your mouth, which he clearly demonstrated on the Pat McAfee show with all of his allusions to various things. I don't know, though. I mean, would you take 9.5? You're saying that Brock Purdy is not a sure thing in these type of spots, that if you can rattle him a little bit, you can probably at least be in the game.
Yeah.
So your inclination there is to, what? Go ahead and take the points with the Green Bay Packers?
Yeah. I mean, I would probably stay out of it, but if you really want action, and people like having action in every game, it makes it more interesting, as you've alluded to, I would go, the Packers defense and run game is good enough where I think they can stay in that game, make it interesting, and then the Niners will eventually win. The most hated term, win, no cover.
Yes.
I think the Niners will win, but I could see them struggling to cover.
All right, I'm going to stay out of that game. I think the Niners will win the game. I don't know about the 9.5 points. If Green Bay plays like it did last week with a spectacular effort against the Dallas Cowboys, a complete blowout, sending the Cowboys back to the drawing board in decimation, just literally trying to question and figure out, what the hell are we doing here? 12 wins 3 years in a row, and we can't get out of the first round of the playoffs. Packers, a nice story. I'm going to stay out of that one and root for them to do well again against the 49ers, who most people have as a clear path, just a clear path to go to the Super Bowl this year. I'll go ahead and agree with you and lay the 9.5 with the Ravens in the Saturday games coming up. A couple of other things very interesting on the local front. The Miami Heat last night. It was history in reverse as the Miami Heat going back to 1996. They had just made a series of trades, in essence, to try and acquire Tim Hardaway and eventually Alonzo Mourning, which changed the dynamic of the team and turned them into a perennial contender for the next several years. But in the process of doing that, they went against the team in 96, the sensational record-setting Chicago Bulls team led by Michael Jordan of The Last Dance. And well documented, they only lost 10 games the entire season, one of which was to a Heat team that only had 8 guys, mostly scrubs, on the roster. That was a game where Rex Chapman, this was in February of 1996, Rex Chapman goes 9 for 10 from three-point range, scores 39 points while being guarded at times by the great Michael Jordan. And the Heat won that ball game 113-104 while being completely depleted. Last night, the Miami Heat, a completely different roster and a different era of Heat basketball under the great Eric Spoelstra. He of $120 million 8-year contract fame. They go into Toronto on a bit of a roll. They have all of their players back. Tyler Hero's in the game. Jimmy Butler's in the game. And yet they find themselves trailing by 37 to a team that had just dealt its two biggest stars in recent weeks, including the night before, trading Pascal Siakam to the Indiana Pacers. High-scoring, high-wire act that the Indiana Pacers are. They play like the Globetrotters, the Indiana Pacers. They're unbelievable. It looks like they're trying to just lay one on the Washington Generals, but high-scoring team, and with Halliburton playing the way he is, adding Pascal Siakam is to be an asset to the Indiana Pacers. But it left the Raptors with virtually nobody. And sure enough, they're up 37 on the Miami Heat, and they pulled off one of those victories that was very similar to what the Heat did years and years back when they beat the Chicago Bulls that year. And just sensational stuff. And then a great match. There's a reason certain people are number one in tennis. The Australian Open has been sensational. And Iga, and we're not sure how to pronounce her last name. I don't think anybody knows how to do it, not even her. Is it Swiatek, Schwitzatek? I don't know, whatever it is. She rallies against the veteran American Danielle Collins, who a couple of years ago was making some serious noise in women's tennis. May have incurred injuries that have impeded her because she was unseeded in this tournament. And she takes on Swiatek in the second round, is up 4-2, love 40 in the third set of that match. And Swiatek rallies and comes back and wins the third set. That was great. A couple of the men's matches went to fifth set tiebreakers. And then earlier this morning, and I guess, you know what, if you're about to pass out and check out and meet your maker, Lubie, would you not charter a plane and fly to Australia so you could buy one more day? I mean, you could be on your deathbed, and that would be the way to do it. You fly to Australia, and guess what? You're relying for another day. But early this morning, which I guess is tomorrow, when it comes to Australian time, you had Rybakina, who is a Grand Slam champion. She's going against some unknown, and Blinkova. And they go to the third set tiebreaker. Now they play a 10-point tiebreaker to decide the match now. They don't go into 100 different games and win by 2. 10-point tiebreaker. The final in that one, 22-20. Rybakina prevails. So a lot of interesting stuff happening there on the scene. Australian Open providing sensational action, including a couple of real challenges by unknowns against Novak Djokovic, who hasn't lost a match there since he was defeated by Rod Laver in 1968. All right, we have to run. Been a lot of fun being with you. Tomorrow we'll get into the Sunday games a little bit. If you want your burial picks, come right here to the morning briefing from Mike Lubie. Lubitz, you've been hot, Lubie. I was embarrassed to go 0-3 last week.
I was 3 for 3 last week. I wasn't hot at all. I was 5
it's hot. I mean, I ended up 2-4 overall, but 1-1 in our plays of the week. So, and we knew that the Chiefs would prevail. 15 people carted away, by the way, in that ball game. I mean, great conditions, right? 15 people carted away, 7 of which were being treated for frostbite at a local hospital, as if they had just crashed their plane into the Andes Mountains and started thinking about eating each other's flesh in the stands there. Never mind, concession stands closed. just take a bite out of the guy's arm next to you. No laughing matter, though, but wow. I mean, 15 people carted out either with hypothermia, looked like Leo DiCaprio in the Titanic, and then frostbite. That's some serious shit. So, be careful out there, especially if you're attending the game in Buffalo. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. That's today's edition of the Morning Briefing. We'll catch you tomorrow with our burial picks for the Sunday games. And thanks so much for tuning in. See you tomorrow right here on NoFilter.net.